Hey guys, and welcome back. This is Mike Hermes at MH Tutorials, and today I want to talk about the basics of Maya, the interface, a couple of short keys and so forth. So if you have any experience at all with Maya, then this tutorial is not for you. This is for first-time users only. All right, here we go. So if you first log into Maya, then you see that there's quite a lot going on. So we're just going to break that down into segments and address that, okay? Now, there are three main areas of activities you can do in Maya. One is modeling, two is rigging, and three is animating, okay? So what is modeling? Modeling is creating objects, typically 3D objects in Maya. And you can do that in two ways. You can either do box modeling, and for that you got a drop-down menu up here, right? Now, they call that a polygon, okay? And these tabs here, right? You find a polygon tab here as well. So if I were to click on this cube, for example, then I could hold down my left mouse button, drag on this grid here, and release it, something like that. Release my left mouse button, click on it again, pull it up, and release. And then I got a cube. This is a wireframe cube, as you can see. If I want this to be a solid cube, so to speak, I'm going to hit 5 on my keyboard. Okay. To go back to wireframe mode, I hit 4 on my keyboard. Okay. So this is what is called a primitive sphere, a cube, a cylinder, and so forth. So if I wanted to create a sphere, I can do the same thing, left click on it, hold down my left mouse, drag on the grid, like that, and release. And in this case, because it's round, I don't have to pull it up separately, okay? So box modeling. Now, what's to do with modeling anyway? I mean, we're not modeling anything, we're creating a cube and a sphere, okay? So the whole deal with Maya is that using basic shapes or primitives, you will create objects. And each individual object here can be changed, okay? So how do you do that? Well, if you look at something like this sphere here, and I'll teach you later on how to do this movement and all that stuff, okay? If you look at the sphere, for example, when I click with my left mouse on the cube, the lines turn green. When I click on the sphere, the lines turn green. That means that the object is selected and you're in object mode. Okay. Now, when I'm in object mode, I can hover over that object. I can hold down my right mouse button, right? And this menu will pop up. Now, the most important thing for now, right, is face, vertex, and edge. Okay, these three. Okay, so what is all that? I'm going to hover over face and release. Okay, so now when I move my mouse around, you see that this red square is moving around. This is selecting a face. So this red segment here, that is called a face. When I click on it, you can see it selected, and I'll zoom in a little bit. Okay, so this here is called a face. That's a face, that's one, etc. Okay, and I can manipulate that, right? I can pull that out, push that in, make it bigger, make it smaller, etc. And doing so will change that face. The second one, and I'll right click again, is edge. So what's an edge? That's an edge, that's an edge. It's one of the edges of that face. Okay. The third one, and I'll right click again, is vertex. A vertex is one of these points here. Okay, so to recap, the face is this whole area, the edges are the lines surrounding this area, and the vertex are the points. Okay, now let's get into modeling. You got a couple of buttons here. The top one here, where you got the arrow, that's the move tool. That will allow you to move a face, a vertex, or an edge, or even an entire object. This one is to rotate, and that one is to scale. So let's try that, okay? So I'm going to go to my object, right-click on it, release on object mode. So now if I left click on it, my object is selected. I'm going to right click again and I'm going to release on face. So now if I click on this face, it's selected. Now I'm going to click on my move button here. Okay, and suddenly these arrows show up. Now down here you got some arrows, and up here you got some arrows. Now what's that all about? If I scroll out a bit, you can see that my objects are sitting on a grid, this grid here. That is not something that will show up in your end result. It's kind of a tool that will help you to position your objects, okay? So I got my sphere here, and I got one of the faces selected. Now, if I move this face, I can move that in 3 directions. In the X, which is the blue, in the Y, which is the green, and in the Z, which is the red, okay? So I got this selected. I'll just zoom in a bit so you can see it better. So I can decide to pull with clicking on my left mouse button to pull like that, right? I can also pull like that, or I can pull like that, okay? Now let's say I did that, and I did that, and so forth, and I want to go back to my original situation. Hold down your control key and hit the Z button. Go back 1 step, again, and I'm back at where I was. So that's how you move a face, okay? I can also move an edge. So I'm going to right click, go to edge, click on one of these edges. I can move that as well. Hit Control Z to go back. I can right click, go to vertex. Drag select one of these little yellow dots here. I can move that and hit Control Z to go back. Okay, now that's moving. Now there's also a short key for that. Okay, if I select my object mode like that, and I hit W, that will highlight. For rotate, I'll hit R. Scale. R is for scale. Okay, E is for rotate. So how am I going to demonstrate that? We're going to switch to our cube. I'm just going to get rid of that one. Just select it, hit delete. I got my cube. Okay, so to move it, I can click on this button, or I can hit the W key. So let's say I'm over here, I hit a W key, boom, it's going to move, okay? I can move the whole object around. I can click on the rotate, right, or hit E, and if I hit E, I got, again, the 3 directions. I can drag on this one, drag on that one, or drag on that one, okay? To scale, that is the R key, and then you get arrows, but slightly different. I can scale it out like that, I can scale it out like that, I can scale it out like that, or I can take the cube in the middle and I'll scale the whole thing up like that. Okay, so that's a little bit about move, rotate, and scale. I told you a little bit about face, vertex, and edge, and how you can manipulate those. Okay, now that is done with these primitives here, and that's called box modeling. Now there's also something called NURB modeling, NURBS modeling. Okay, that is a totally different ballgame. This primitive box modeling is like taking a solid cube and manipulating the shape. NURBS modeling is more like taking sheets of paper or any other material for that matter and modeling them in space to create, let's say, a hollow 3D object, if you know what I mean. It's like, wrapping paper around a balloon to get a balloon shape. Something like that. I don't know if that's an accurate description, but that's how I see it anyway. Okay, so a couple of things about modeling. Now, next thing is, whenever I start to manipulate something like the sphere or the cube, and a lot of stuff you will be doing initially is box modeling, probably. When I change anything on this object has information about how large it is, where it is positioned in space, and so on. Now, where can I find that information? That information is up here in the attribute editor. Okay, now let's say that that is not showing up. You got this button up here, right? You can click on it or click on it again, it's gone. What you can also do is click on your object, hold down your control key and select A, and that will show up the attribute editor. So now it's gone. When I select my object, it's going to show up. And I got a couple of tabs here that will give me information. First of all, my polycube 1. This is my polycube 1. It tells me the width, the height, and the depth. And I can actually play with that right here by manipulating the slider like that. What it also tells me is how many subdivisions do I got in the width, height, and depth. Now, what are subdivisions? I'll show you. These are subdivisions, okay? Now, why would I want subdivisions anyway? Well, I'll show you. If this is all at 1, and I right-click on this, and I go to Face, and I select this face, and I go to my Move tool, I'm going to move this whole entire thing, right? Now, we're going to go to our polycube. I'm going to increase the subdivisions. Hang on. Object mode first. Increase the subdivisions like that. Now, I can select right-click, face, and just select that little face there, and only manipulate that one. That's one of the reasons, okay? There's a lot more going on there, but for this point in time, as we're covering the basics, you know, that's just good to start with. Something else. We started off in this hitting 4 on a keyboard in this wireframe mode, and then I told you hit 5 for shaded mode. Now, shaded mode means that there's some sort of default light, otherwise you would have a black screen, and it's bouncing off of a texture, so to speak, a material. What Maya does in default, when you create a material, it's going to apply a material to it, and that material is called Lambert, and that's a tab over here. Okay, so when I got my object selected, object mode, and I go to Lambert, I can see that a gray color called Lambert is applied to this cube. So when I click on this color here and I change the color to red, my object will turn red as well. Okay, pretty cool, huh? All right, so that is a little bit about box modeling. I told you a little bit about NURBS modeling, about the basic move, rotate, and scale tools and the shortkeys for that. Now, the next thing is rigging. Now, what is rigging? I told you that you can animate in Maya. You can make 3D characters and have them walk around or move around and so forth, okay? Now, first, I'm going to give you a very, very simple demonstration of animation. So I'm just going to get rid of this. And I'm going to create a simple, primitive polygon sphere like that. Drag it out in the grid. I'm just going to pull it up a little bit. Okay. So, if we want to animate something that is one object, like this ball here, we just say, okay, this is your position in space. I want you to move over to that position in space, and you're allowed to take this much time to do that. So how does that work? You got this slider down here, and this slider is the number of frames, okay? So my scene currently has 24 frames. I'm going to change that to 100, like that. And I'm at number 1 here. You can see the slider. I'm going to hit S on my keyboard to create a keyframe. Just get that selected. Hang on. Oop, there we go. So this little red line indicates that's my keyframe. A keyframe is like a key pose, so to speak. Okay, so this is my initial pose. Now, I want by frame 80 to have my ball over here. So I'm going to hit S again. And again, I got another red line. So what I'm telling Maya is, during 100 frames, I want the object to move from there, frame 1, to there, frame 80. Very, very basic animation. So if I move the slider up and down, you'll see the animation in progress. Okay, so, and again, very, very basic. I'll just hit the play button and you see it slowly moving. Now, the pace that the ball is moving at depends obviously on the number of frames. Typically, an animation will have anything from, let's say, 24 to 30 frames per second. Okay, so if you got 100 frames, that's like roughly 4 seconds of animation, something like that. So you can imagine if you got an hour and a half movie, how many frames that is. You know, and the guys at Pixar, you know, they're working like 200 people for years to get one movie done. So that tells you a lot. Now, back to the rigging part. Okay, so here we're moving just the object. Now, let's just say, I'll just get rid of this, that we got a, don't mind me doing this, we got a body, we got a little head here. Let's see what I'm doing, and I'll just explain what I'm doing in a second. Don't worry about that. Okay, so, and this is probably the most crude puppet ever made, but you know, doesn't matter. Okay, so let's say that this is a guy, head, body, legs. Okay, now rigging. If you want to animate anything that's more complex than just one simple primitive, you will probably have to rig. Now, rigging means building a skeleton inside your object. So I need to connect the head to the body, to the legs, and so forth. And the other reason is when I create the skeleton and I rig it together, similar to a human body, when I move one object, the other will move as well. Okay, so if everything was separate, I could take this head and move it over there. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't do that with my head. Okay, if you create a skeleton inside, you do a couple of things. First, you create controls. So I can, for example, rotate the head like that. But also, when I move the head like that, and there's a rig, then the body will move forward as well, right? Or if I lift a leg, then the body will tilt over, etc. So that's what a rig is, okay? And then you can animate parts of the body instead of the entire body moving around like a brick, so to speak, okay? So that's a little bit about rigging, and I showed you a few things about animation. Now we're going to go back to the interface. Actually, I'll leave this in the screen. You saw me just now creating a couple of objects and moving around, like for example, doing this, right, and this, and this, and so forth. Now, how do we do that? Okay, first of all, if I want to zoom in on my object, I have a scroll wheel on the middle of my mouse, and I can scroll in and scroll out, like that, okay? Let's say I want to rotate my screen. I hold down the Alt key, click on my left mouse button, and I can just move that around any way I want, okay? But let's say I got this here, and I want the whole scene in the middle of my screen. I hold down the Alt key, hold down the middle mouse button, and then I can move it like that. Okay, another quick short key that you can use is if you got your object selected that you're working on, just hit F on the keyboard and it will zoom in on the object you're working on. Okay, now as you can see, this cube is, let's say it's just above my grid, right? And I want it exactly on my grid, and I'm going to move that down. It's hard to see when I'm exactly at that point, right? Now you got this little button here with 4 boxes on it. That is my panel layout. So if I click on that, I see my objects from 4 different views. This is my 3D view, right? This one here is my side view of my object. This is my front view, and that's my top view. So if I were to take this ball and move it out, and I want it back to the center of my box here, I can try to get it right like that, but it's easier to go to this view and check on it from the top, right? Now, if I want to work on just one of these screens, I can hover over that screen with my mouse and hit the space bar, like that. If I want to go back, I go back to my view, like that. Hover over this screen, hit the space bar again. Okay? So, let's recap here. We talked about moving, rotating, scaling. We talked about the short keys to do that, which is W, E, and R. We talked a little bit about box modeling, about NURBS modeling. We talked about rigging. We talked about the basics of animation. I showed you some keys that you can use, right? So Alt left mouse to do this, Alt middle mouse to do that, your scroll wheel to zoom in and zoom out. This will switch your views, hit spacebar, go back, hit spacebar, and go back. In your attribute editor, you can change color. You can, you got the 4 for wireframe, right? You got the 5 for shaded mode. That's, I think, enough for a first session. If you got any questions, let me know. Hopefully this was helpful. I did this tutorial based on some questions that I got, people that are struggling with these, first steps in Maya, so to speak. So hopefully it's going to help you on your way. And thank you for watching. Bye.